So I came across another book that I read on my flight up here for the 8th time, and I'm not exaggerating, 8th time, completely through. I read about 3/4 of it on the plane, and then the rest of it when I got into the hotel room the night before last. In fact, the flight attendant, Sonia, where are you, Sonia? There she is over there. She's here as my guest because she got talking and recognized me and all of them, but she can tell you that that's what I did for the whole flight. Even when she was sitting there trying to talk to me and interfering with what I was doing, I said, come on over Sunday, okay? She canceled the flight to be here. And the book is called The Impersonal Life. And it has become something that I carry with me. It's the book that Elvis Presley carried with him throughout his entire career, and he died with it in his hands, in his pockets. It was on his being. The Impersonal Life. It was written in 1914, 100 years ago, and it was published under the name Anonymous until 1940, which was the year I was born. And when the reason he published it under the name Anonymous is because he was a Lutheran minister, and what he was receiving, very much like the Course in Miracles, was just like this channeled material was coming through him, and he knew that he would not be able to stay as a Lutheran minister. He was in Akron, Ohio. His name is Joseph Benner, B-E-N-N-E-R, Joseph S. Benner. When he passed away, his wife decided that it should be published under his name. And the book is written as a message from your impersonal self to your personal self. Your impersonal self is that intelligence that's busy inflating your lungs right now and taking the oxygen and pushing it through to the various places in the body that it needs to be. All of it. I mean, you know so little about your body that if I ask you to point to your pancreas, I asked an audience one time to point to their pancreas, and one woman pointed behind her ear. Okay? So, but you got a pancreas in there, and you got a liver in there, you know, and you got all kinds of, you know, rivers of fluids and so on inside of you. And this impersonal self of yours, there's no place that it is not. It's in every single one of us. It's in everything. It's in every rose. It's in every one of those millions and millions of tiny little dots that you didn't look at close enough to see that they're all solar systems, individual solar systems, in an infinite universe that just can't end. How could the universe end? What do you suppose is at the end? You think there's a wall? How did it get there? How thick is it? And even more important, what's on the other side? Can you grasp what Blake is speaking about here with this idea of the infinity that is you? Your infinite self? You are an infinite self. And this intelligence is in everything and every one of us. If you could cleanse the doors of perception, that is how you perceive the universe, and just see it all as infinite, including yourself, your fear of death would just go like that. The last book my mother read before she passed was a manuscript that wasn't even published yet of Dying to Be Me. And she was in an assisted living center 96 years old, walking around to all of the rooms, knocking on doors, and telling them, dying is easy, don't worry about it. You can't die, don't worry about it. It was like one of the greatest gifts that you gave my mom. And we had endless talks about this idea of death. But so, we're calling this impersonal self God. If you're in China, you'd call it the Tao. If you're in India, you'd call it Brahman. There's no place that it's not. Vasista's yoga is all about coming to an awareness of Brahman and no longer identifying yourself on the basis of your ego and your persistent belief that who you are is this thing that you see, even though the thing that you see in the next moment is something different than what it was. So therefore it's not real. So if God is the creative source of everything, this infinite intelligence is the source of everything, and it's in us, then the creative source of everything is in us as well. That's just a logical conclusion. That quote came from Deepak's latest book, The Future of God. That it's such a powerful awareness and a powerful knowing that what Benner taught me in the impersonal life is to see that as it is speaking and as it was being dictated to him through this automatic channeled writing. And I know about this because I've experienced this channeled kind of writing where it just flows, it just comes. The power of intention was that just came that way. I went back and looked at it when I was writing I Can See Clearly Now, and I can't even believe how good that book is. Seriously, I didn't even know I knew that. Really, I didn't even recognize some of that writing. It was just flowing writing, and it was at the toughest time in my life, physically the toughest time of my life. When my wife and I, after so many years and raising 7 children and all of the love between us, we separated. It's even hard for me now. I spoke to her before I came on because I never go on to speak without talking to her. We love each other, we're close to each other, but for some reason, but I had to go to that place inside of me that forced me to become a more compassionate person, a more loving person, a kinder person. And it was out of that compassion and that pain that I was living through at that time that allowed that writing to come through, and it's the most popular book that I've ever written other than Your Erroneous Sounds. Benner said, speaking, his language is always your impersonal self speaking to you and trying to get you to understand that you are an attribute of God. You're a piece of God. You're an attribute of God. Very much like every cell of your being is an attribute of you and its purpose. Each cell that you have inside of you, the ones in your arm, in your pancreas, back here in your pancreas, all of those individual cells give up their individuality in the name of serving you. And as an attribute of God, that is your role as well, to give up your sense of individuality, because there is no individuality. That's your illusion. The universe is non-local. It's all one intelligence. And your role as an attribute of God is to give up your sense of ego and who I am and how important I am and how separate I am, and to have this recognition that you're not separate from anything. It's impossible for you to be. That's just the illusion that you live under, which causes you to have fear, and the fear is the thing that causes you to have cancer, and the cancer is a individual cell within your body that has lost track of its purpose in being there, and instead of cooperating with all of the other cells, which is what the cells are supposed to do to keep you flowing and being, what it does is it gets violent and it starts attacking the cells next to it and the cells next to it and gobbling them up. And it's such a stupid organism that it kills the very cell, the very host that it is dependent upon for its own survival. And off it goes. And it's teaching us to understand the same thing, that you become like a cancer cell in the consciousness of God when you maintain your individuality and don't recognize the light that you are. This is heavy, but it's so glorious that once you get it, I mean, it's like I could cry telling you, it just makes you want to love whoever you encounter, wherever you go. You let go of all of that stuff. Like the great Indian poet Tagore, back in 1927, I think it was, or 26, wrote a collection of poetry called the Gitanjali. Tagore did you read Tagore when you were a young girl? Did you? Yeah, I mean, his stuff is just so beautiful the way he writes. This is what he says about the ego. I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame. But I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. Now, how can you write any better than that? It's this ego that we have to abandon and come to an awareness about who it is that we really are inside. This book thrills me, The Impersonal Life. The recognition, there's 18 chapters in this, and that's not a mistake either. There's 18 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord. 18. One infinite source. 18. In Hebrew, the number 18 means what? Somebody in here knows. Say it. Harm. What does it mean? Life. Life. 18. I pick up the Tao Te Ching, written 2,500 years ago, and guess how many chapters there are in the Tao Te Ching? 81. Infinite source. Once. My social security number has 81 and 18 in it 5 times. It does. 3813. I don't want to say it. 18 verses, 18 chapters. 17th chapter is called Finding Me. And I'll share some of what what that said to me. But when I read this, I listen to the way that it speaks to me. Maybe you can understand it this way. This is a pot and it's heavy. And I brought this all the way from Maui because it was made for me by one of my daughters who's been troubled with addictions and is struggling right now, but is on a new path in her life. And and she made this for me in college, in Montevallo College in Alabama. And I've had people take pictures of me using this pot as a demonstration. It's like it just gives her this sense that when she made this thing, and she told me exactly how she made it and how you put it in the kiln and all of the things that you do with it. And so I carry it on the plane, put it in, wrap it around in a towel. I'm very careful with it. So if you look at this pot, and ask yourself, what is it that makes this thing a pot? And your answer generally would be, it's all of the material that is here, and that's what constitutes a pot. It's got clay, and it's called a clay pot. So I say to you, well, what if the clay is what makes this thing a pot, then if we take a hammer to it and put all of the pieces right here, we have all the clay, but we don't have a pot. So it must be something more than just the clay that makes this thing a pot. What's required in order to make this thing a pot is the space inside. Without the space inside, there can be no pot. The space inside, as a metaphor, is called infinite consciousness. You heard me say before, just as space is unconcerned with all of the clouds that manifest within it, come and go, as many as you want, dark ones, light ones, soft ones, big ones, rainy ones, dark, all endless numbers of clouds. And space is just unconcerned with that. It's just go ahead, all that you want. Infinite consciousness is the same way. And there's just no words to describe infinite consciousness. Anita's going to try, but she's going to have trouble with it because you cannot describe what it feels like to leave this body and be immersed in infinite consciousness. The only thing that comes close to it is when you go into your dream state for 1/3 of your life, when you just leave your body there and your brain, you leave it there on the bed, and off you go. And there's no time, and there's no space, and anything that you put your attention on instantly manifests. Just like that. There it is. That's what happens when you leave this physical universe, when you leave your body. And you place your attention wherever you want to place it, and it's instantly there. That's awaiting you. T.S. Eliot said, "We shall not cease from exploration. But at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time." You shall not stop exploring, but when you're done exploring, you return to this infinite place from which and now you'll recognize it. He, I think, was speaking about death. I'm not. I know that you don't have to die, as we know die, because who you are is deathless and birthless. And you just manifested like the clouds in space. You just, like infinite consciousness, unconcerned with whatever manifests within it. It all manifests within it. And that infinite space is absolutely necessary in order for us to have a clay pot. Obviously, the clay in crumbles and in pieces is not a clay pot. Mold them in such a way, and now the interesting thing is that the space does not need this clay pot in order to exist. But the clay pot can't exist without the space. It can't. I hope you see where I'm going with this. Because I'd like you to now think about yourself as a clay pot. And we can take all of the pieces that constitute you, this river of fluids that is going through your body, pour it all out here. All the bones, put them all in. Cut you into 1,000 pieces and lay it right here. And you would say, well, is that you? You're standing back here just looking at all of these pieces that have been cut up and all of these fluids and all of this skin and all of this stuff inside of you, these organs and things inside of you. You realize that that isn't what it is that makes you who you are. What you need in order for you to exist is exactly what the clay pot needs in order for it to exist. It's the silent invisibleness within that makes you what you are, not the outer covering. Who you are is the infinite space within it. And it's absurd to think that this pot began, because remember, in order for it to exist, it has to have that space. That it began when my daughter created this thing for me 10 years ago at college. The infinite space has always been there. And you don't take the infinite space from here and then carry it over here. You don't have to. It's always there. There's no place that it is not. It's in every single one of us. And that it can't die when you break it apart, because what it is the space inside. It's just as absurd for you to think that you began when this body of yours manifested into infinite consciousness. Infinite consciousness was just there, and you showed up in it. And the idea that when you leave this body, if you choose to, I'm not sure you have to anymore. I used to always be sure of that. Not anymore. Especially after reading the life and teachings of the Masters of the Far East. That when that thing that we call death comes along, that's the end of who we are. It can't be. Because what it is that makes us what we are is the silent, invisible, infinite consciousness that is what identifies you as who you are. It can never die. You are in an infinite universe. You are so incredibly blessed to be a part of this thing that You need to go through life every single day in a state of deep, solid appreciation for the miracle, the magnificence of who you are. Not this body that you're in that you think is going through a process that you have no control over. Yeah, you can't stop those fingernails from growing. I'd like you to now think about the importance of silence, because that's where your power is. That's where you'll come to know it. Silence is like, mathematically, it's like zero. You take zero, you cut it in half, you just get more zero. You multiply it by anything, you get more zero. Silence is like that. Blaise Pascal, a very famous French scientist and philosopher, said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. We're terrified of silence. We can't seem to be in a state where we allow silence to be our way of being. I don't know how to get you to where I'd like you to be. Seriously, I want you to walk out of here today at 5 o'clock with just an awareness of what that second poster there says. That God is the creative source of everything, therefore it's got to be in you. And if it is in you, and you really just accept that it's in you, that you are the space, not the clay pot, then everything that God is capable of doing, you're capable of doing, because you are God. You are a piece of God. And if that's offensive to some, which it is, it's because you have had your subconscious mind programmed to believe that you're just ordinary and that God is something that exists outside of yourself. Even though throughout the spiritual literature, in the Christian literature, throughout the New Testament and the Old Testament, Psalm 82, you are all children of the Most High. You are all God's. Jesus himself said, you are God's. Is it not written, he said in the book of John, is it not written in your laws that I have said you are God's? When I wrote that in Wishes Fulfilled and spelled that out and got interviewed, but people who just took such offense at that, they said, well, yeah, it does say that, but that isn't what Jesus really meant. I would say, so you know what Jesus meant, and I'm just saying what it says here that he said? Or in the book of Philippians, St. Paul says, have in you the same mind as Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. Why weren't we trained this way? Some say that the reason that Jesus turned out so well and influential is because he had a mother who really believed that he was God. There's an old joke that it said that Jesus was lecturing to the masses, to the multitudes, and he said, let you who is without sin cast the first stone. And out of the crowd comes a rock and knocks Jesus right in the head, and he falls down. And he gets up and says, Mother, sometimes you really pissed me off. It's an old joke, but it's didn't know I was going to tell that today. We have such a fear of saying, so if you have, even when I was on with Oprah talking about this, she said, Wayne, you can't say you're a God. I said, well then, if you have a problem with that, just use the word that Jesus used. He didn't use the word God. He said, God is what? Love. God is love. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. So use that word. Not God from the ego's perspective of something that is bigger and stronger and more important and blah, 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 and you have to be subservient to it and so on. But seeing yourself as God, being willing and able to say, I am God, I am love. It doesn't make me better than anyone else. That's not what love is. Love has no recognition of hierarchies. It's not blasphemy to say, I am God. And the books that I have, another one that I read was The Infinite Self by Stuart Wiles, one of my dear friends who passed away last May. Was very hugely influential in my life. Introduced me to the Tao Te Ching. Talked to me about how he left everything behind and just walked away from it, turned the key. And I did the same thing at 65, 9 years ago. Just walked away from it all, gave it all away. Decided to live the life of a Taoist for a year and write 81 verses, 81 essays on what the Tao Te Ching was teaching us. Some call it the wisest book ever written. Stewie he opens the Infinite Self with the first chapter. 33 verses, 33 chapters on how to reach higher consciousness. Starts with the first chapter, I am God. 3 magic words, if you've read 3 magic words, incredible book, one really influential book for my 3 magic words. You don't really find out what the words are until the last chapter. What are the 3 magic words? I am God. It's all over the spiritual literature. I am God. And yet we have such a fear. But what else could we call this silent, invisible space within us other than God? It's what, and when you recognize that, then everything that God is capable of doing is within your power to do. And I'm only just beginning. I think I was given leukemia I think Anita was given cancer to give. There's just no accidents in this universe. I mean, look at the trillions and trillions of stars in the universe and galaxies by the hundreds of billions. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes for always. And it's always moving because it's infinite. So what I want to do now is I want to do about a 15-minute meditation. And as you do this meditation, I want you to repeat. I'm going to give you a mantra. You may meditate yourself, and that's all wonderful. But I would like to give you a mantra from the impersonal life. This is on page 31. I want to make sure I have this page that I wanted. Yeah. Okay, so here's your mantra. And I'm going to play from the CD that I put out with James Twyman called the I Am Wishes Fulfilled Meditation. We're going to play track 3, which is the sound that was taken from the original words that Moses received from the burning bush, when it said, I am that I am, they took those words in Chinese and created the sound that went with them from 2,500 years ago. How they did that, I have no idea. But it's a magical, magical tone that you'll hear. And James Twyman had a sound engine. They went back and historically found out what those sounds were. It's a very magical sound. I meditated to it every day. So the words you're to use to repeat these over and over again are be still and know I am God. All right? And here's the reason. Without thinking, allow this, my divine command. Now he's speaking here when he says my, that's your impersonal self. That's what's growing your fingernails. That's what's beating your heart. That's all right. So this is now speaking to your personal self. You know, your eyes, your ears, your nose, you know, all of those things that lead you to believe a lie, as William Blake said. Without thinking, allow this, my divine command, to penetrate deep into your soul. Let whatever impressions that come to your mind enter at will, without effort or interference on your part. Note carefully their import, for it is I, within, through these impressions, instructing you. Then, when somewhat of their vital significance begins to dawn upon your consciousness, speak these, my words, slowly, imperatively, to every cell of your body, to every faculty of your mind, with all the conscious power you possess. Be still and know I am God. Speak them just as they are herein written, trying to realize that the God of you commands and demands of your mortal self implicit obedience. Study them, search out their hidden potency, brood over them, carry them with you into your work, whatever it may be. Make them the vital, dominating factor in your work, in all your creative thoughts. Say them 1,000 times a day until you have discovered all my innermost meaning, until every cell of your body thrills in joyful response to the command, be still, and instantly obeys. And every vagrant thought hovering around your mind hides itself off into nothingness. Then as the words reverberate through the caverns of your now empty being, then will you feel the swell of a wondrous, strange breath filling you to the extreme of all your mortal members, causing your senses almost to burst with the ecstasy of it. Then will there come surge after surge of a mighty, resistless power rising within you, lifting you almost off the earth. Then you will feel within the glory, the holiness, the majesty of my presence. And then you will know I am God. Be still and know I am God. This is the divine command. On page... in volume 3, I'm so prepared, I can hardly stand it. I usually do all of this without preparation. This is chapter 15 of volume 3 of the Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. It is a well-known fact that the oftener you say or use the word God, knowing it to be the highest principle indwelling and flowing through you, the greater benefit you will derive from it. Allow me to repeat. Our thought is, you cannot say God or use the name too much. See God as creative principle flowing through you. Concentrate and energize that principle and send it out with more dynamic influence. Because of the fact that it is always flowing through you as well as around you, you are able to give it a greater impetus by sending it out with the whole force of your being, impelling it outward. God. I put together a CD called Japa years ago, and it's the repetition of the name of God. Is God. And that sound is the sound of creation. That's where creation comes. What japa is the repetition of the sound. And that sound needs to come from just about 3/4 of an inch below your navel. Because your navel is the place where you are connected to your source. I mean, that's where you are connected to your original source, your mom. And that connection is still there. It's your so right from about 3/4, when you're doing this meditation and you're taking your breath in, try to bring the breath all the way up from this place in your navel, all the way up as you're repeating this sound into interiority. And just before we do this meditation, I want to read to you one of my very favorite things from Vasistha. This book is so filled with stories, just powerful, powerful stories, that sometimes I would read them. I would sit out on my lanai, and I'd read them and I'd be in tears. It would be, I'm getting there now, it would be so powerful. And one of these stories, and I just think, oh my God, I do have that power within me. I really know that I have that. I've got to be able to convince people of that. And that was the birth of I Am Light. And this seminar, it was just a thought. Everything that now exists was once imagined. Anita is here because I imagined her to be here. And then I was forced to follow through on. You are here because I imagined coming to Portland a week before Denver and doing something called I Am Light that I had never done before, other than we did it on Maui in January. Everything that now exists was once imagined. What do you expect of yourself? This is, I was a teacher. I've been a teacher my whole life. I taught in elementary school, grade school. I taught in junior high school. I taught in high school. I taught in undergraduate school. I taught in grad school for years and years. Half of my adult life I spent in, as a teacher. And now here I am with just a bigger classroom. Well, we've put out 10 public television specials that have reached into the homes. Probably there's not a person in here who hasn't had those specials show up in your house at some time. I had a woman write to me who had gone to a hotel with a gun in her purse, convinced that she could no longer just take it any longer. Such was her pain and sadness and depression. And she checked into a motel with a gun that had a silencer on it. And she wrote and showed it to me and sent me a picture of it. And she turned on the television because she didn't want any noise in there, even though she had a silencer on there. And she turned on the TV, and my public television special on Power of Intention was airing at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And she watched it and turned her entire life around in one moment. Yeah, not for me. It's that. I get very emotional with this. So this is a book called The Deer, about the deer. I call it the deer story. Written thousands of years ago by Vasistha. A deer, known as the mind, which had been wandering in the wilderness of countless concepts, notions, and prejudices, and which somehow finds the right path, takes shelter under this tree. This deer is pursued by its many enemies who covet its hide or covering. It hides itself in thorny bushes known as the body in an attempt to save itself. All this effort wears out its energies, running hither and thither in the forest of samsara, which means constant rebirth, replaying of life, constant samsara. Harassed by the winds known as vasana, or latent tendencies, and scorched by the heat of ego, the deer is afflicted by interminable distress. This deer is not easily satisfied with what it gets. Its cravings multiply, and it continues to go out far in search of satisfaction of those cravings. It gets attached to the many pleasure centers known as wife, children, etc., and it wears itself out in looking after them. It is caught in the net of wealth, etc., and it struggles to free itself. In this struggle, it falls down again and again and injures itself, Borne down by the current of craving, it is carried far away. It is haunted and hunted by innumerable ailments. It is also trapped by the different sense experiences. It is bewildered by its alternate rise to the heavenly regions and its fall into the hell. It is crushed and wounded by the stones and rocks known as mental modifications and evil qualities. To remedy all these, it conjures up by its own intellect various codes of conduct which prove ineffectual. It has no knowledge of the self or the infinite consciousness. This deer, known as the mind, is made insensible by the poisonous exhalation of the snake known as worldly pleasure and craving for such pleasure. It is burnt by the fire of anger. It is dried up by worries and anxieties. It is pursued by the tiger known as poverty. It falls into the pit of attachment. Its heart is broken by the frustration of its own pride. At some stage, this deer turns away from all this and seeks the refuge of some tree already described, the tree of meditation. And there it shines brightly. Supreme peace or bliss is not attained in any other condition but the unconditional state of consciousness, and this is attained only in the shade of the tree, known as samadhi, or meditation. Isn't that beautiful? That's the mind. That's what it does to you. And then we go through this our entire life until we come to a place that we are now at, where we're going to just listen and repeat over and over, be still and know, I am God. It's my divine command from your impersonal self. Minutes. slowly.